Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Slovenia once again for the first time in what feels like a good long while. And that of course means that we're going to have a look at yet another beer from the latest instalment of the Davor box. So first and foremost, a massive shout out and thank you to Davor Širic, my Slovenian beer mule and the original beer mule here on Rampant Lion Reviews as well. He was the very first one who started sending me boxes of beer regularly to review on the channel, and it's really cool to be able to review Slovenian beer because it's a country that's quite small in terms of geography and population, so their beer doesn't really get out there that much apart from a few select breweries such as Lobik perhaps, but you know, they've got some really interesting stuff down there. They've got quite a thriving hop industry as well. Slovenian hops, the Savinja Valley and all of these kind of things, and it's really cool that Davor picks out all these beers for me and lets me review them on the channel. So I like doing my bit to support the Slovenian beer industry and kind of promote it a little bit, and Davor over the years has picked me out some very interesting stuff. He always throws in a few kind of Belgian beers and things like that into the box as well, because he's a huge fan of his Belgian stuff. But we've still got 5 or 6 beers to review, Slovenian beers to review from the last Davor box, but I have been a little bit lazy with that over the last little while because all of the ones that are left require a bit of brewery research, so I'll need to get on that again over the next month or two, but still very cool to do my bit and support the Slovenian beer scene. So I hope that you guys enjoy these Slovenian beer reviews here on the channel, and a big thank you once again to Davor for making these possible. But yeah, for this review then, we are going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel once before. We're going to go to Kamnik, which is to the north of Ljubljana, the capital city, which is almost right in the dead centre of the country, and we're going to have a look at my second beer from Maister Brewery, or Maister Pivovarna, I guess we could say. So this beer comes from their Pregl series, which is their experimental series of beer, and it is called the Winter Ale. It's simply called the Pregl Winter Ale. It comes in at 8% ABV, and I'm not sure exactly what to expect of this one. So this is going to be one of these beers where we don't really know what to expect until we actually open it up. But I'm guessing it will be a darker beer just by the looks of it, and it might be a little bit spicy and things like that. So yeah, definitely curious to see how this one turns out. An 8% winter ale from Maister Pivovarna in Kamnik in the northern part of Slovenia. So Kamnik of course is home to Pivovarna Maligrad as well, who are one of the more established Slovenian craft breweries actually. But yeah, definitely looking forward to this one. Hopefully it turns out to be a good beer, and I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So let's see how we get on then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Maister Pivovarna before, and we will see about adding more reviews to that list in the near future, maybe with the next Davor box whenever we do that. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Slovenian beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's being added to quite gradually at the moment because I've still got a few Davor beers to review over the next little while, and we will continue to add to that over the years of course. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Maister Pivovarna then, or the Maister Brewery, however you want to call them. So Maister Pivovarna, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Kamnik, which is to the north of Ljubljana, kind of towards the north of the country, I guess you could say as well. But the brewery was founded by Janusz Skok. So Janusz studied chemistry and he worked for Helios and then for Lek, but he realised that he didn't really want to work for a large corporation, and he kind of wanted to start his own company. But Janusz's family owned the bar Pri Maestru, and he took over the management of this. But he was involved in the procurement side of the business too, and it was there that he first encountered craft beer. And at that time, nobody was selling it in Kamnik, so he decided that he wanted to be the first. But soon after he got involved in selling and buying the craft beer, he decided that he wanted to start brewing for himself, and he had recipes for release having done a good bit of home brewing, he had all these recipes ready in 2014. And the first beers were the Vega Pale Ale and also the General Meister IPA, which he brewed himself on a small scale. But he didn't have equipment or a premises, and so initially he was brewing as a gypsy brewer, and mainly at the Vizier Brewery in Surnomel, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, in 2015. But the gypsy brewing was a challenge logistically though, and then he found a premises in Kamnik which was suitable, and then he invested 400,000 euros in the new facility, and production started there in autumn of 2017. In 2018 they produced around 190,000 litres in this facility, and today they're employing 6 people, including 3 brewers. But they also open up the brewery every Thursday to host a small bar, and they've just been gradually expanding their brewery capacity and their sales over the last couple of years. As of April 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 16 different kinds of beer. The other thing that's really interesting about this brewery is the names that they use, all the different names both for the brewery and for the beer. So the brewery takes its name from the famous Slovenian general Rudolf Maister, who was born in Kamnik and lived from 1874 to 1934. Apparently during the First World War, the Maribor City Council proclaimed an annexation of the city to Austria, and Meister, who had actually served in the Austro-Hungarian army, organised a 4,000 strong Slovenian volunteer force and seized control of the German-speaking city on November 23rd, 1918 for the state of the Slovenes, Croats and Serbs, and this day is now a Slovenian national holiday, and he was also known for his poetry as well. So you'll find that a lot of the beers and brew and things like that these guys do are named after famous Slovenians, and in fact the Pregl series, which is their experimental series of beer, this is named after Friedrich Fritz Pregl, who lived from 1869 to 1930, and he was a German Slovene and did a lot of research in chemical reduction for quantitative analysis, basically, dissolving things with acid and stuff like that so you can analyse how much of something is in them. But he won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 1921, and yeah, that is who the experimental series is named after, so I think that is pretty cool. So yeah, this brewery name a lot of their things after famous Slovenians, which I think is pretty cool. So hopefully they can hopefully they can build their exports a little bit and make people more aware of what Slovenia has done for the world, because they've, when you research about some of these famous Slovenes that their beers are named after, then it's quite interesting, because they've actually, Slovenia, for such a small country, their scientists and their famous people have actually done some quite impressive stuff, you have to say. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about the brewery in terms of history. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's get on and have a little look at this one. Incidentally, if you are interested in Slovenian history, Slovenia was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire for a good chunk of its history, so you will find a lot of Slovenian stuff through researching about the Austro-Hungarian Empire. When it comes to this guy as well, Pregl, he was of mixed background. Apparently he spoke German, but you have to remember in that time, sort of 1869, this is when you've got the Franco-Prussian War and stuff. The international language of science at that time was German, so it kind of makes sense that he's known both by Friedrich Pregl and Fritz Pregl as well. So Friedrich is the Slovene name for him, whereas Fritz is the German language name. But yeah, interesting, definitely interesting. It was nice to have a little read about what Pregl did before filming this review. But as you can see, this beer is a half-litre bottle. There you can see the artwork there with the guy with his gas mask on, and in the, looks as if it's, yeah, I think this is meant to be like a, almost looks like when you watch the series Chernobyl, looks a little bit like some of the guys who are working in there. I forget the name of them now. The liquidators, that's it. Looks like one of the Chernobyl liquidators on the thing there. But if you actually look closely at the label, you can see the brewery tanks and stuff, and then it just tells you a little bit about Pregl, both in Slovenian and English as well. So Pregl is our experimental brew science series inspired by Nobel Prize winning Austro-Slovene chemist and physician Frederick Pregl. So yeah, plain black bottle cap on this one, half litre bottle as you can see, and like I mentioned to you earlier, this one is an 8% winter ale. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. As I said to you earlier, I'm really not sure exactly what to expect of this one. Other than the fact that I know it's, it's a winter ale, so probably a dark beer with a little bit of spice or something like that in it. Even on the Untappd page, it didn't really say so much about what was actually in the beer, but yeah, I'm not sure exactly why Davor would have chosen this one to send me, because I just basically say to Davor, pick out a few things that you think are interesting, I'll send you the money for it and review them. That's basically how it goes. So yeah, interesting stuff, definitely. But there we go. So I have to check. I have to get the bottle lined up because otherwise my OCD is not happy, of course. But yeah, as you can see with this one, well, there's quite a wee bit of sediment in this, but it's been sitting in the fridge for a little while, so that makes sense. So before the head disappears, you can see that this beer poured with about a quarter finger of a frothy, I would say kind of fawn coloured head there. It has faded away to just be a very, very thin foamy layer, but a nice thicker ring around the edge of the glass. But yeah, there's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. I mean, overall, it does look pretty nice, this one. So there are little bits of particles suspended in this one. It does have quite a fair wee bit of particle and suspension there, but it's all natural, it's not such a big deal. But in terms of colour, I don't know how well you guys are going to see that, but it's actually a very nice, rich, mahogany, chestnutty kind of colour, this one. It almost looks a little bit like a Dunkel Lager or a Doppelbock or something like this, or a Czech Cherny, I guess we could say as well. So I do wonder exactly, when it's 8% though, probably the closest thing, if we are looking at it in that kind of light, it's an ale rather than a lager, right enough, but it does look quite similar to a Doppelbock. So yeah, maybe it is just intended as a winter warmer. I really don't know exactly what kind of style this beer is, but in terms of if we consider it as a winter warmer, the appearance of this one is kind of what you'd expect. A darker beer, which looks pretty nice. So yeah, in terms of the colour of the beer, remember the colour depends on, one, the type of malts that you use, two, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. But yeah, it depends in the first instance on the type of malts that you use in that first instance. But yeah, in terms of a winter warmer, not overly surprised by the appearance of this beer. But yeah, as you can see, there's a few little bits of sediment floating around in this one because I've had it sitting for a wee while. But yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma of this one and just see how we get on. Nothing too crazy to report in terms of appearance for this beer. So let's have a look at the aroma. Oh yeah. So this is kind of interesting for sure. There are different kind of spices and things in this one, definitely. But I will say it does smell pretty nice actually. It's got a little bit of an almost kind of Christmas puddingy type vibe to it, or a little bit of gingerbread kind of vibe, something like that. So yeah. I always like beers like this that are a little bit kind of quirky, but yeah, it definitely has a little bit of a kind of gingerbread sort of thing to it, and a little bit of a kind of, I would say, yeah, a little bit of a gingerbread, a little bit of a sort of Christmas puddingy type vibe. So yeah, first impressions of it, a little bit of a spicy beer, but nothing wrong with that. So let's try and break down the aroma for you then, and just describe it properly. So I would say the backbone of this beer, it's got a nice sort of grainy, bread crusty backbone to it, definitely. There's a good little bit of a kind of brown bread in there, and it's almost like a kind of rye bread. It's almost like a sweet sort of German rye bread type thing that's forming the backbone of this beer. There are one or two little sort of cakey elements in there as well, like a sort of spongy cake, which I really like. Pardon me. And then within that, you've got a little bit of a sort of cinnamony, gingery type spice thing to that. I can't quite place exactly what spice it is. I'm not too well versed. I'm not too well versed on exactly what the spices would be, but it does have a little bit of cinnamony, kind of gingery type vibe to it actually. Reminds me a little bit of kanelbulle, of course. Up here in Sweden, the cinnamon buns are very are really quite well known. But I really like how that side of the beer goes together. I think the way everything. This is one of these beers where the way everything just fits together is quite interesting. But yeah, toasty bread crust to it, a little bit of a kind of brown German rye bread. You've got those kind of cinnamony, gingery spices kind of mixed into it. Something maybe a little bit of cardamom or something like that. Could well be. Could be, I don't know. But yeah, sitting on top of that though, you do get a little bit of a brown sugary element. There is a bit of a sweet caramelly note in there, some nice toasty caramelly elements to it as well, which I really like. So yeah, sweet caramel in there, a little bit of a toasty brown sugary element, like I said, and also also just a little bit of it's really just got this cakey sort of biscuity vibe about it. Definitely some biscuit elements in there. So yeah, it's cakey. There's a bit of cakiness, a bit of biscuitiness, a bit of breadiness, and then it's just got spice and some brown sugar mixed into it. I think that's a good way to kind of summarise the malty and adjuncty side of things with this beer. So yeah, it's quite interesting for sure, I have to say. Yeah, I'm not sure what else we can really say about the malty side of things in this one. So let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer, and then we'll have a taste of it. So hoppy wise, it's kind of what you would expect. Slovenian hops, as I've told you, Slovenia has quite a thriving hop industry. Green Gold Brewing are owned by the Roynik family, who are quite well known in the whole hop production business down in Slovenia. You can check out my reviews of their beers, which they very kindly sent me actually. But yeah, this beer, the Slovenian hops, generally speaking, have a little bit of that kind of noble German vibe to them, a little bit of a kind of Czechy sort of thing as well. They're not a million miles away from those types of hops, but you really get that sort of typical, almost noble hop green component out of these beers. There's a little bit of an earthiness to this one. You get a nice, quite bright floral character, but it does have a little bit of the smoothness of the German hops as well. So nice kind of floral elements in there for sure. Quite a bright floral note and a good little bit of grassiness as well. But overall, the hoppiness comes across as quite smooth. But remember, I'm drinking this beer. It's been in the bottle like maybe it's been in the bottle 3 or 4 months. So it's not at its prime freshness, we will say that. But you know, it's 8%, so it is going to hold up fairly well. But yeah. Aroma wise, it's quite an interesting beer, this one for sure. I think it's the green component is a little bit earthy, little touch herbal, which suits the kind of spicy side of the beer. Some nice bright floral notes and a little bit of grassiness. Fruity wise though, there's a few interesting things going on in there. But yeah, fruity wise for me, there's a little bit of a kind of cakey vibe in there. I would say, it's these kind of cakey elements that you get out of it. You get a little bit of that. There is a tiny little touch of a slightly almost phenolic kind of thing, like you can get out of, say, a Belgian double, I should say, something like that. But you also get a little bit of, you're getting a little bit of a raisiny sharpness in there. There's a wee bit of plum, some figgy notes for sure, and a sort of black curranty, blackberry kind of thing. You're getting these typical fruity elements out of the beer as well. So yeah, just take a little bit of time and ponder over the aroma of this one before you get stuck into it. But I think it's about time that we have a taste of this beer then. So this one is the Pregl Winter Ale, coming in at 8% ABV. From the Pregl Experimental series, of course, at Pivovarna, at Maister Pivovarna in Kamnik in the north of Slovenia. Let's have a try of this beer. Once again, a massive thank you to Davor for making this review possible, and the other Slovenian ones. Let's get stuck in. Slanje, skol, na zdravje. Cheers. Yeah, that is quite nice actually. In terms of flavour profile, if we are thinking about this in terms of flavour profile, it is actually very like a Doppelbock. That's, if I was blind tasting this, I would probably think that this is a Doppelbock. It's actually very similar to some of the Swedish brewed Doppelbocks that I've had, but it's an ale. They say specifically that with this one, it's an ale. And remember, the technical difference between a lager and ale is the temperature of the fermentation. Lagers, bottom fermenting yeasts, usually lower temperature fermentation between 8 to 12 degrees Celsius, whereas an ale, higher temperature fermentation 15 to 18 degrees Celsius normally. Top fermenting yeasts. This beer though, it really does remind me of some of the Swedish brew Doppelbocks that I've had. The first impression of it is that it's got a lovely oiliness to it, and it's a real kind of smoothness to it. I've found in previous reviews the Slovenians love a kind of oily beer, and that's the type of vibe that you get out of this one for sure. But yeah, I like this one. In terms of the way the aroma translates into the flavour, it's not a million miles away from what you would expect from it, to be honest. But yeah, it's just like a very thick Doppelbock, actually. That's what this beer really reminds me of. But I like it. It gets a thumbs up from me, this one. I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink that again. I was a bit worried about it as well when it was a half litre rather than a 330, but this will be quite a nice one to kind of sip away on over the next little while, and it's definitely nice just to have to sit and review another Slovenian beer. It's been too long. As I say, I've just been too busy to do the research on the other beers that Davor got me, but they can sit for a little while. They'll be all right. But yeah, in terms of the flavour profile then, let's try and break this down a little bit. So, middle third of your palate then. The backbone of this beer is a nice bread crusty element to it. It's not toasty. The aroma gave you the impression of it being a little bit more kind of toasty than it is. But if you think about a German rye bread, it is actually very much like that. So that sits on the backbone of the beer in the middle third of your palate. You can feel that nice, just kind of rye bread crusty sort of thing sitting on top of that. You get a bit of a softer brown bready note on top of it as well. If you go to the front corners of your palate and then go diagonally backwards, you will find one or two kind of woody, sort of little woody elements kind of creeping up out of this one as well, just a few woody undertones. And if you go to the dead centre of your palate and then just gradually follow the line of your tongue forward, there is a bit of a nutty character to this one as well, which I think is really interesting. Yeah, so those are the kind of underpinnings of this beer, and then the more that you drink of this, with the bready side of the beer, it actually develops a little bit more of a kind of sponge cakey type vibe to it. But the sort of spicy notes that you get out of this one, they are actually quite subtle, but they're kind of blended in with the bready side of the beer, and you'll notice that in that middle third of your palate, the breadiness kind of gets there. Then the further you go into the aftertaste, these sort of slightly cinnamony, I don't know if gingery, it doesn't seem like strong enough to be gingery. It's almost a little bit more kind of cardamom-y, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's these kind of spicy elements though, they're all blended together and they sit in that sort of bready layer that the beer has, which is quite nice. So yeah, you've got all of that kind of sitting there in the middle third of your palate, and I think that works. That works really well. So yeah, bread crust on the backbone, the brown bready notes in there, you've got a few woody and nutty undertones there, and then the spicy notes just come out the further you go into the aftertaste with the beer sitting on top of that. In the very centre of your palate though, you've got a nice little bit of, you've got a little bit of a kind of oily, brown sugary element. You've got a little bit of a kind of brown sugary element coming out of this one. So yeah, it's got a little bit of that oily brown sugary element in the middle of your palate. It's got a little bit, there is a wee bit of a kind of treacly molasses kind of vibe with this one. You can tell with this beer that I think this has had a slightly longer boil. You can kind of tell from the colour a little bit that it's had a bit of a longer boil, and the brown sugars come across as sort of quite oily and caramelised in a sense, which would make sense. But as you move out from the centre of your palate, it does get a little bit more of a kind of toasty brown sugary element to it, and as you reach the kind of edges, the extremities of that middle third of your palate, you start to get more of a kind of, you get a little bit more of a kind of biscuity vibe about it, a McVitie's digestive sort of biscuity sort of thing, cookies as the Americans would call it. I'm not sure how good a reference that is for Slovenians watching this review right enough, but you know, it does for me, it does have a good little bit of that sort of kind of biscuity vibe to it, of course, there as well. But yeah, in terms of, I think that covers the middle third of the palate, pardon me, quite well in this one. I think that covers what's going on there. But if you go to the back third of your palate, then let's focus on that. On that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel a little bit of a sort of doughy, yeasty kind of build up in there, which you're always going to get in beers. You always get a little bit of that, and you can feel a little bit of graininess as you go across the palate. But the back third of your palate has a really nice kind of bready base to it. You get a little bit more of a kind of grainy bread crusty note on the back third of your palate there. But sitting on top of that, you'll get the more airy, yeasty kind of flavours out of the beer. So the flavour feels a little bit taller on that back third of your palate, and you get all those kind of airy sort of things sitting on top of that. So yeah, I really like that. I really like that side of this beer for sure. So yeah, the flavour's a bit taller at the back third, on the back third of your palate, and as you move further forward you can feel it just kind of condensing down a little bit. So the flavour starts like this, it condenses down. As you reach the middle third of the palate, it condenses down quite a lot, and then as you move into the middle third of your palate, you can feel the flavours are a little bit more kind of condensed together. It is a little bit more like that, but yeah, it certainly works, and I think it goes together quite nicely. So this beer, as I say, it's quite bready and quite cakey and just spicy. So it's a typical winter warmer, but it certainly has a bit of a kind of doppelbocky vibe about it, this one too. But I like it. I definitely like this beer. Definitely different from the last one we reviewed, which was the Russian IPA, if I remember the name rightly. And I thought that was quite an interesting beer for sure. I enjoyed that one. So we need to see about something else from these guys later, maybe like an Imperial Stout or something, if they have something along those lines. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things with this beer then, back corners of the palate, you get a nice little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, it does develop a little bit of a herbal quality, and as you reach the front kind of corners of the palate, it progressively becomes a little bit more floral. You know, it comes across with this typical sort of noble vibe that you get from Slovenian hops, and then round the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more kind of grassy in a sense too. So I really like how that side of things goes together with this beer. Absolutely. The green component, I think, gives you a nice herbal, and it leans more towards the herbal earthy side of things, which suits the sort of cakey, bready, spicy backbone that this beer has. But yeah, I like that for sure. But on the front third of your palate then, let's focus on that. So on that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a bready, doughy, yeasty build up there. And yeah, you definitely get that out of this. You know, you get a little bit of a kind of grainy, crusty sort of thing in there too, which is nice. And the backbone of that front third of your palate, again, is a sort of brown, spicy, brown, bready, slightly spongy, cakey kind of thing. I really like that about this beer. But on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy, fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, some interesting things going on in this one for sure. Yeah, the fruity side of the beer is quite interesting. So there is an element of that slightly phenolic-y side of things that you'll get in a Belgian double or something like this. So it does have a wee bit of that in there, because yeah, the base of that front third of your palate feels a little bit sort of cakey, but when you take the beer in, there's a teeny little bit of raisiny sharpness in there. You do get a little bit of a plummy note to it, but there's quite a few dried fruity vibes in there, you know, some sultanas, you know, dried white green grape sort of thing. There's a little bit of a datey element to it as well. I don't really get prunes, to be honest, but I do get a little bit of a datey kind of sultana type vibe out of it. And as you move further forward, there's a few interesting things going on in there as well. But as you reach the kind of front half of that front third of your palate, it becomes a little bit more figgy. You get a little bit of a kind of black curranty vibe there, and then you get a few more juicy blackberry notes kind of sitting on the front edge of the tongue too. So, pardon me. Yeah, it's quite an interesting beer, this one, in terms of its fruit, but it's a lot more, I think the things that it's the sultanas and the sort of datey elements to it, and a bit of the currant that really linger there into the aftertaste with this beer. If it wasn't for the kind of thickness of the beer as well, it'd be quite difficult to judge it as being 8%, to be honest with you. is, like I say, this one, it really just has that kind of Doppelbock vibe to it. And I think even to find a Doppelbock at 8%, you know, a traditional German one at least, when I think of like Celebrator, the Salvatore, the Corbinian, all of these kind of things, that's a wee bit difficult. That is a wee bit difficult, but yeah, I like how all of this goes together, absolutely. But yeah, the flavour and kind of aroma, the flavour sort of aroma profile of this beer is just really nice. It is like a kind of slightly spicy Doppelbock in a lot of ways, actually. That's kind of how it goes together. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel then, just to round off the review, I would say that this beer for me, it is kind of pushing the top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. It's kind of like that. The carbonation is very smooth. The mouthfeel overall is quite oily, and I've noted this in other reviews that the Slovenians seem to really like an oily mouthfeel, so that kind of makes sense. So yeah, it is just like a very thick Doppelbock in a lot of ways, to be honest with you, but you know, the thickness kind of gives you the ale quality, and it is called a winter ale, so that makes sense. In terms of bitterness and things, you know, I think this beer is, you know, maybe about 20 IBUs. It doesn't feel overly bitter, but you do have that kind of spiciness to it, which you'd expect of a, say, winter warmer, which I would hazard a guess is the specific style category that this beer would fit into. So yeah, you've got a nice kind of spiciness to this beer, of course, as well. The malty side of things, it's very layered, you know, sort of toasty, bread crusty, grainy element in there, smoother bread, a little bit of sweetness and a good bit of spice in there. So your malt base kind of has everything you'd expect of the style, which is nice, and the spiciness I think comes out a little bit more into the aftertaste. The hoppy notes we've kind of covered, and then the fruity side of the beer, it's quite a dried fruity vibe that you get out of this one, but there is some really nice oily fruity character to this beer too. But I think overall this is a really interesting beer. It's made me think a little bit for sure, but I think the correct style category for this one would be winter warmer, but it does have just a nice thick Doppelbocky kind of vibe to it as well. You can sort of feel the kind of German beer influence on this one, to be honest with you. And as I said, Slovenians, a lot of the beers I try from Slovenia, it's the oily mouthfeel that kind of sticks in mind for me with these beers. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. So once again, Davor, thank you for making this review possible. I hope that you enjoyed this one, and I hope the rest of you watching from Slovenia and further afield enjoyed this as well. But I think that's the point where we can round off this review. So a lovely big oily and still quite smooth winter warmer beer from Pivovarna Maister in Kamnik in the north of Slovenia. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Maister Pivovarna, and I will catch you guys very soon with another beer review. Slàinte, skål, cheers, na zdraví, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you for watching.